My name's Ro Campbell. Well, it wasn't my lifelong dream from a very young age, but I was into sort of drama type stuff when I was younger, and it's probably fair to say my career actually peaked in 1987 when I was both cast as a principal role in a children's TV show and a feature film, and I literally haven't achieved those dizzy heights in showbiz ever again. Best part about being a comedian, lot of free booze, that's good. Not having like a proper boss, but that's a double-edged sword because you got to like constantly push yourself, otherwise you fucking die. But that's cool. Managing your own life, getting to go to I get to go to a lot of different places. That's cool as well. Make connections with people all around the world. And Willie Nelson said that the greatest thing you can do in life is carve your name into people's hearts. And I travel the world carving my name into people's hearts. And sometimes into their heads too. My first gig was at the Stand Comedy Club, which is quite a prestigious venue actually, in Edinburgh in Scotland. It's owned by Tommy Sheppard, who is now the Deputy Leader of the Scottish National Party and could possibly be Prime Minister of an independent Scotland one day. Fingers crossed, that would be fucking awesome. And I've definitely got some dirt on that motherfucker. Anyway, so they run a new act night every single Monday. They've done it for 2 decades probably. It's where Frankie Boyle, Kevin Bridges, acts like that started out, and that's where I started. I try to blank those out. That's the whole point of drinking as a comedian. But one that does stick in my mind was when I first got into doing proper international gigs, which is about 10, 11 years ago now. I went to India and to do some shows in a southern city in India called Bangalore. I was very new to I had never even performed in Southeast Asia, which I now go there all the time. So I was very new to that scene. I'd mainly only done comedy in Britain, with the exception of a few gigs in Australia. So I went there with my Australian British material, and I was doing this. I had this routine at the time. It was a bit of a trademark of mine. It was actually quite a good routine, and I dusted off once in a while. It was about David Hicks, the only white guy who was ever incarcerated in Guantanamo Bay, and he was from Adelaide, which is where I'm from. And I used to do this big routine, and I'd actually been killing at this gig in India. I killed for the first 10 minutes. I did all this stuff about. I actually lived on the Indian subcontinent when I was a kid. I grew up in Kathmandu in Nepal. That's a fucking long story, but so I was doing stuff about that, and then I moved on to this David Hicks routine, and oh my God, I'd never struggled like that before. That was a proper death, like it was silence, and in the middle of, I was ploughing on, and I had the cold sweat going, and I just kept going on because I didn't have a lot of other stuff to fall back on. Just out of the dark, or out of the audience, this like very very well-educated, sort of upper-class Indian voice just went, "Take a break, buddy." Take a break, buddy. And that is probably the most cutting heckle I've ever had. Steve Hughes, probably, I think, the greatest living Australian stand-up. Well, definitely right up there. He's like a freak. I was lucky to see him tons and tons of times, like maybe 10, 15 years ago when I first started out, and he was always at the Edinburgh Fringe then, and he was just an awesome comedian. Who else? Well, Jamon is a brilliant comedian. Great. He's so good. Very clown as well. Who else? Joan Rivers was obviously awesome. Zoe Lyons in Britain is hilarious. Becky Lucas. Becky Lucas is like, she's new, but she's fucking hilarious, isn't she? What a bitch. Too good, too fast. I mean, I won Scottish Comedian of the Year competition, award, whatever you want to call it, 10 years ago. And that at the time was pretty huge. I've done loads of tours in Asia, and they've all been a lot of fun. I've played the Hackney Empire in London. That was sick. That's like 1,500 people. But yeah, I'm still waiting. I'm fucking 44, still waiting for that big televised break. But hey, whatever. I'm happy playing in the clubs. It's changed a lot, man. Like when I started, there was like 12 comedians. and obviously that's an exaggeration, but there was far, far less comedians. When I first started, YouTube barely didn't exist, Netflix didn't exist. There was a very small amount of stand-up comedian available for just easy consumption. You had to really be into it. You had to go and buy DVDs, VHS tapes, whatever. And that started changing very rapidly. And obviously in the last 8-9 years, or however long Netflix and that's been around, like there's so much stand-up out there, and that consequently has made a lot more young people want to do comedy. And also what happened in the UK about 10 years ago, they started putting so many stand-up comedians on TV. They had tons of showcases. They had Michael McIntyre's Comedy Roadshow. They had Live at the Apollo. They had tons and tons of stuff. And what happened was, out of those people that did that, about 4 or 5 or 6 of them just became enormous, like massive names, like multi-millionaires. People like John Bishop, Sarah Millican, even Frankie Boyle. He was sort of one of the more like outlaw ones of them, I suppose. But that also drove a lot of young people to want to do comedy in the UK especially. So all of a sudden, and that also changed things in a way as well, because in a way, in the UK had such a strong comedy club culture. But when it got so big on TV, it was like people became more interested in going to see the individual comedians doing their tours rather than just taking a chance on comedy clubs. And I think that's almost over now. It's almost come full circle, where people are again taking a chance to go into comedy clubs and just trust comedy clubs to book good comedians they haven't heard of, because all the big names do their own tours now. They don't play the club nights like they used to. So to answer your question, it's changed a lot. The internet has changed comedy a lot, and obviously I'm one of the older generation. I'm trying to change my attitude to it, because the young guys produce loads of content, put out clips all the time, and not many older comics do that. But you kind of have to, I think, now, it seems. And yeah. Quit, because there's enough comedians. The world doesn't need you. No, serious advice. Yeah, probably this is a bit of advice that Jamoan gave me when I first started. He said to me, don't tell anyone you know that you're doing stand-up comedy until you've done 60 or 70 gigs. And with the exception of my girlfriend at the time, I didn't tell anyone, and I never invited anyone to a gig. And that was a really good piece of advice, because the first time I invited some friends to come and see me, I had a whole load of gigs under my belt, and I was already pretty decent. My act had gotten tight, and they were blown away. And the mistake a lot of young comedians make is they invite their friends and their family to their first gig, and obviously they're dog shit. And then their friends and family don't have any belief in their ability to ever be a comedian, and they'd never want to fucking come and see them ever again either. And so it kind of burns that thing. So yeah, keep it to yourself, man, if you really want to do it. I've got a podcast that I'm going to start this year. I've built a website and all that, but it's just getting it all done. I've got the equipment. I'm going to do a podcast about all my crazy travel stories. It's going to be called Confessions of a Road Junkie. It was just going to be called Road Junkie, and then some other dickhead already had a podcast, already had a website called Road Junkie, and I looked into getting him killed, but it was quite expensive in the Western world to get people assassinated. So I'm just waiting for him to go to Cambodia, where you can get it done for like $300. But other than that, just, yeah, I mean, I'm really, I've actually improved my lifestyle, so I don't drink as much and all that as I used to, and I'm just, like, I'm 44, which young people think's old, but it's not really in the scheme of things. Like, one good thing about comedy is it's not like being a pop star. You know, there's been brilliant comedians who keep going until their 70s, people like George Carlin and Joan Rivers and that. So just keep evolving as a comedian, really. Keep churning stuff out and adapt to the times and get some content out there. # Ro Campbell, fuck yeah. It's always a pleasure to play here at the Sit Down Comedy Club. I think it was the first weekend comedy club that I ever headlined in Australia, and I've been back every year since. I really enjoy coming here. It's what comedy should be. It's in a basement. It's to, you know, to regular working people who, you know, and that's what I love, is just opening up people to stand-up comedy who may not, you know, may not have seen it before. And this is a great club. It does it all brilliantly, and they look after the acts really well. And you know, I just love coming here and playing here. I mean that sincerely, and I say it everywhere I go, but I mean it here.